They make mistakes. Children are allowed to make mistakes. That's how they learn. So that's what I try to teach my kids. But you have to sometimes let them make those mistakes as well. I've always spoke about social media and the power of social media. What I've found personally, especially with my kids as well, use it for the right reason.
Welcome to Old Hollywood Whispers, the channel where celebrity headlines don't stay polished. They get stripped down layer by layer. If you're here for the genuine narratives behind the fame, hit subscribe right now and stay locked in, because this one cuts deep. At 50, David Beckham finally opens up about Brooklyn Beckham, and no one warned us it would sound like this. You can win trophies, build empires, and still lose your own son in silence. Some pain doesn't explode. It creeps in slow, so slow that by the time you notice, the bond is already gone. People swear the Beckham family is untouchable. Picture perfect, iconic. Money, fame, and non-stop love from the public are supposed to glue everything together, right? But they don't see the empty chair at dinner, and nobody asks why it stays empty. At his son's wedding, when David realized he wasn't at the center anymore. You think losing a child only means death? Nah, sometimes losing a child means they're still breathing, still smiling, but no longer reaching back.
Brooklyn writing, "My wife has been consistently disrespected by my family, no matter how hard we've tried to come together as one. My mom has repeatedly invited women from my past into our lives in ways that were clearly intended to make us both uncomfortable." The 26-year-old adding, "My parents have been trying endlessly to ruin my relationship since before my wedding, and it hasn't stopped. My mom canceled making Nicola's dress in the 11th hour, despite how excited she was to wear her design, forcing her to urgently find a new dress."
Behind the flawless image are years of silence, quiet distance, and one brutal truth. Success doesn't just give, sometimes it takes. Today at 50, David Beckham says, this isn't about forgiveness, not at all. This story isn't here to clean up an image. It's here to expose quiet family tragedies, the kind with no headlines, no chaos, no breaking news, but damage that builds slowly and hits hard. There's only one real question left hanging. Do you have the nerve to stay until the end and honestly look at your own family without blinking? Back in 1999, while I was still wearing the Manchester United jersey, my name was everywhere. Front pages, TV screens, non-stop noise across England, all eyes locked in. That same year, my first son was born and we named him Brooklyn Beckham, a name connected to a city. But from day one, it transformed into something bigger than a childhood. Before he could even walk, cameras were already tracking his every move. Leaving the hospital, first birthday, first day of school, every moment transformed into news. No one ever asked Brooklyn who he wanted to become. Not once. The only question people cared about was, what will David Beckham's son turn into? And back then, I genuinely believed I could protect him from all of it. But fame doesn't work like that. You can't fold it up, you can't hide it, and you definitely can't lock it away. In the early 2000s, my career kept our family moving nonstop. New cities, new countries, no time to settle. In 2003, when we left England for Real Madrid, Brooklyn was still very young, but his life was already on fast forward. New schools, new languages, new surroundings, while the cameras never backed off for a second. By 2007, when I signed with LA Galaxy, we packed up again and moved to Los Angeles. From that moment on, Brooklyn wasn't just living in the football world anymore. He was thrown into a louder, tougher entertainment culture. In America, he wasn't just another kid starting school, he was David Beckham's son in Hollywood. Every step he took carried more weight than any child should handle. By 2011 and 2012, as he entered his teenage years, the media circled back to the question I knew was coming. Would Beckham's son follow in his father's footsteps? I brought him onto the pitch. I gave him the opportunity. He trained, he showed up, he tried. But anyone watching closely could see the truth. Brooklyn didn't have that natural bond with the ball. No spark, no explosion, no fire like the one that drove me. In 2013, he gave it a real shot at Arsenal Youth Academy. The press watched every move, every drill, every rumor. But not long after, he walked away quietly. No announcements, no excuses, no drama, just one soft door closing. A moment that didn't make noise, but still changed his path forever. From that point on, Brooklyn Beckham started searching for something different. Photography, fashion, creativity, lanes that had nothing to do with football. He wasn't running away, he was trying to breathe. And in 2016, when he released his photo book, the reaction wasn't calm, it exploded. The backlash didn't hit because of the book itself. It hit because he dared to step off the track everyone else had already mapped out for him. The noise came fast and loud. Privilege, family fame, living in Beckham's shadow. For the first time, Brooklyn was standing face to face with public doubt. not because of his father, but because of his own decisions. Back then, I stayed quiet. I thought silence meant protection. I'd survived pressure by keeping my head down on the pitch, so I believed the same rule applied here. But I missed something important. This wasn't my fight to control. After that storm, Brooklyn didn't vanish, and he didn't turn his back. He was still around, still present, still showing up, but he wasn't at the center anymore. He sat at the table, the photos still went up, the moment still happened. But the rhythm felt different. There was no public argument for cameras to chase, no big statement for people to tear apart, just a slow, hard-to-name distance settling in quietly, without noise, but impossible to ignore. A child raised under nonstop attention, trying to figure out who he really is, and a father slowly realizing he can't lead the same way forever. I'm not saying there was a break, not like that. But from that moment on, I knew something had shifted. I had to learn how to step back, and that choice would later become the biggest question of my life. Because when a child walks far enough on their own, it's no longer about who's right or who's wrong. The real question becomes, is the father still standing in the right place in his child's life? And that question didn't come quietly. That was only the start. Around 2019, it became clear to me that Brooklyn Beckham wasn't a kid searching anymore. He was in love. And this time it wasn't light or casual. He loved with the focus of someone ready to step fully out of the family shadow. When he brought Nicola Peltz home to meet us, I felt it immediately. A different world, a different family energy, a different rhythm, different values, different ways of moving through life. No one had to say it out loud for me to understand. From that moment on, nothing would be simple anymore. Then, in July 2020, Brooklyn got engaged. The news didn't move slowly. It spread fast, headlines everywhere across the UK and the US. And while the world celebrated, I stood there realizing just how much had already changed. The public applauded loudly, congratulations everywhere, smiles on every headline. But behind all that noise, a quiet question started creeping in. Who would really control the story of this wedding? In our family, image had always been carefully managed, not because we were pretending, but because fame demands structure. Every move gets watched, every detail gets pulled apart. But the Peltz family moved differently. They didn't live for the spotlight, and they didn't shape their lives around public opinion. At first, that difference felt small, barely noticeable. But over time, it transformed into invisible pressure that kept building. It all began circling around one detail that seemed harmless on the surface: the wedding dress. According to reports from major outlets, Victoria Beckham was at one point expected to design the dress. To the media, it looked like a perfect symbol, a mother-in-law creating the gown for her future daughter-in-law. Yes, a united celebrity family moment. But then the story split. Some reports claimed the design couldn't move forward because of timing and technical limits. Others suggested the change came late and added stress to the bride. No one outside that room knows the full truth, and they probably never will. But the real issue wasn't fabric or sketches. It was the feeling underneath it all, feeling left out, feeling pushed to the side without a conversation. In the end, Valentino Haute Couture was chosen. The fashion world praised it instantly. Headlines loved the elegance. But behind the scenes, that dress quietly marked the first visible sign of misalignment within the family. Then, on April 9, 2022, the wedding took place in Palm Beach. The celebration looked flawless from the outside. But by then, the distance had already begun settling in, unnoticed by the crowd but deeply felt behind closed doors. Everything looked flawless on the surface, elegant, polished, picture-perfect, exactly what the world expected. But what happened inside that room was later described in very different ways depending on who you asked. One moment kept coming up in media reports. When singer Mark Anthony performed, some sources say he invited Victoria Beckham and me onto the stage. In front of everyone, he called my wife the most beautiful woman in the room. To outsiders, it sounded harmless, just a compliment, nothing more. But according to later accounts, that moment landed differently for the bride. Some say it made her feel pushed out of the spotlight on her own wedding day. Yet others argue it was a misunderstanding, or that it happened after the main ceremony. No version ever became official. And here's the part people don't like to admit. Families don't need a clear villain to crack. They don't need someone to be fully right or fully wrong. Sometimes all it takes is one moment that feels off, and it never fully settles. After the wedding, the shift came fast. No public statements, no loud arguments, no dramatic fallout, just quiet signs. The press slowly started connecting the dots. Brooklyn Beckham appeared less at family gatherings. Some birthdays passed without him there. Group photos stopped showing up. Messages became shorter, more formal, and distant. Then, after years of silence, Brooklyn finally spoke. Not right away, but later in interviews and statements. He talked about feeling unprotected, or about important moments being taken from him. about choosing to stand firmly by his wife to protect the family he was building. That's when it hit me. That wedding wasn't just a celebration, wasn't just one day. It was the line everything crossed without anyone realizing it at the time. Not because of a dress, not because of a song, but because for the first time in his life, Brooklyn Beckham wasn't standing in the middle of my family anymore. He was standing on the other side. And when a son takes that step, every father is forced to face the same quiet, painful question. Have I slowly become the person he's stepping away from? And once that thought hits, another one follows fast. What do I do now? From the second half of 2022, the British press started noticing something specific. Brooklyn wasn't showing up at formal family events anymore. Now, the pattern wasn't loud, but it was clear if you were paying attention. In September 2022, I celebrated another birthday. In the past, my birthday always came with the same familiar image. All the kids standing beside Victoria Beckham, smiling, cameras flashing, the classic Beckham moment. That year, Brooklyn wasn't there. No group photo, no airport sighting, no public explanation. The press summed it up in one short line. Brooklyn and Nicola Peltz were absent. Once can be a scheduling issue, twice can be coincidence. But when the absences kept repeating, people started asking questions. By the end of 2022, it wasn't just one event. It was several gatherings he used to attend, even briefly, passed without him. No announcements, no arguments, no headlines screaming drama, just a growing pattern of silence. And sometimes silence says more than any statement ever could. Images of Brooklyn Beckham started popping up more often with his wife's family. Private get-togethers, low-key settings, no press lines, no staged moments. That's when the media quietly changed how they framed the story. Instead of asking if there was conflict, they asked something sharper. Why is Brooklyn choosing to be here and not there? By 2023, the narrative picked up speed. A series of interviews and public comments from Brooklyn began surfacing, and they all carried the same message. My wife is my #1 priority. My family is where I feel protected. Not said once, not hinted at lightly, but repeated enough times that reporters knew these weren't just polite words anymore. That same year, when the Beckham documentary was released, the viewers expected a full family picture, or at least a clear present-day mention of Brooklyn. But what stood out wasn't what was said, it was what wasn't. Brooklyn was almost completely missing from the current timeline. No explanation, no commentary, no direct acknowledgement. That silence spoke louder than any statement ever could. By the end of 2023, both UK and US media started using heavier language. Words like distance, strain, and emotional separation entered the conversation, not because there was proof of a blow-up, but because the timeline told its own story. Then came 2024. Major family events rolled around, moments where Brooklyn's presence used to be automatic. But once again, he didn't show. This time, the press didn't just say absent, they said noticeably absent. Around that same time, Brooklyn's posts took on a more personal tone. Messages about building his own family, choosing his own path, and drawing clear lines about where he now stands. He started using words like boundaries and loyalty, words that sound normal on the surface. But to a father, those words hit differently. Because when a son starts talking about boundaries, it usually means that in his mind, something has already gone too far. I won't deny anything, and I won't confirm it either. But by this point, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. It wasn't that Brooklyn Beckham had vanished from the family. It was that he had built a life where the old family was no longer at the center. His absence didn't come all at once. It came slowly, quietly, until the days without him became frequent enough for the world to notice and clear enough for a father to understand something painful. If I didn't change, I wouldn't lose my son to anger or conflict. I'd lose him to distance. As 2024 began, the questions didn't come from headlines anymore. They came from empty chairs at family dinners, from calls that went unanswered, from trying to plan a meeting that never got confirmed. And for the first time in my life, I felt something I'd never known before, not knowing how to step into my own son's life. During that time, Victoria Beckham and I had countless conversations, not shouting matches, not public drama, just long, heavy talks late at night after the house went quiet. We read the same articles, saw the same photos, noticed the same pattern. Brooklyn was building a world where we no longer existed the way we once did. And what hurt Victoria most wasn't that our son chose his wife. It was the feeling of being shut out of decisions, of no longer being part of moments that once came naturally. That realization sat heavy because by then it was impossible to ignore. She once believed she still had the right to be part of moments she helped build. For a mother used to managing details, shaping images, and holding the family together under constant attention, Victoria Beckham saw Brooklyn's silence as more than distance. It didn't feel neutral anymore. It felt like rejection. And then, the moment everyone sensed finally arrived. On June 25, 2024, the confrontation happened. Not in front of cameras, not for headlines, just inside the family, where things finally stopped being avoided. And we didn't ask Brooklyn Beckham about the press. We didn't bring up rumors or articles. We asked about family. We didn't ask why he wasn't showing up to events. We asked why he wasn't saying anything at all. And for the first time, Brooklyn didn't dodge the moment. No soft answers, no hesitation. He said he didn't feel protected, that every time we stayed silent, it didn't feel like respect to him. It felt like indifference. He said he'd spent his entire life growing up under expectations, under plans that weren't always his. And now that he was building his own family, he didn't want anyone, not even his parents, continuing to write his story for him. That was the moment a father understands something painful. What you believed was love, your son experienced as pressure. What you thought was guidance, he felt as control. Victoria reacted more strongly than I did. Not with anger, not with blame, but with emotion that had been held back for years. She spoke about the sacrifices, the years spent protecting the family image, the hard calls made behind closed doors, the constant pressure of keeping everything together while the world watched. Nothing exploded, no doors slammed, but the weight of what was said changed the room forever. And then Victoria Beckham asked a question that cut deeper than anything said that night. So, everything I did it mean nothing? Brooklyn Beckham didn't answer right away. He sat with it. And when he finally spoke, his words changed the air in the room. He said he was grateful. He said he understood the sacrifices. But he also said he couldn't live inside a structure where every move had already been decided. He said his small family was the only place where he felt fully safe, fully himself. And if he ever had to choose, that's where he would stand. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of clarity. No one raised their voice, no one walked out, no dramatic exit. But in that moment, we all understood something quietly final. A boundary had been drawn. This wasn't betrayal, this wasn't disrespect, this was painful maturity. Because when a child finally finds the courage to say, "This is my limit," it usually means they've been carrying that weight for a long time. There was no instant reconciliation after that talk, no staged hug, no public statement saying everything was fine. Instead, a new kind of silence settled in, heavier, clearer, impossible to ignore. Brooklyn left not in anger, but with resolve. And he continued building a life with the woman he chose. And for the first time, we were forced to face a question we'd never truly asked before. Can a parent's love survive if it refuses to evolve? And that's when it hit me, love, when it refuses to change, can slowly turn into the very thing that pushes a child away. I didn't sleep for nights after that conversation. My mind kept running backward through the years, 1999, 2003, 2007. Every time my career moved, the family moved with it. I told myself I was doing what was right, doing what was necessary. But looking back, I started seeing the cost. I thought about the moments I chose silence instead of listening, the times I believed saying nothing was strength. Oh, and that's when the hardest truth settled in. We had become so focused on controlling the story that we forgot to ask what our son actually needed. After that conversation, none of us dared to call it an argument. The house went quiet, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind of quiet where every tick of the clock sounds louder than it should, like time itself was reminding us that something important had slipped out of reach. Victoria Beckham and I stopped talking about it every day, not because it was resolved, but because we were both scared that saying too much might break what little connection remained. Some subjects don't need words anymore. One look is enough to say, "Not yet." The months that followed were filled with small, careful attempts at healing. Most of them didn't work. I sent messages, nothing long, no blame, on just simple words from a father. "How have you been?" Sometimes Brooklyn Beckham replied, sometimes he didn't. Sometimes the response came days later, short, polite, too polite. The kind of politeness that hurts more than anger. They felt like messages from someone I used to know. There were moments I thought about flying out to see him, standing face to face. And then I stopped myself, not because I didn't want to go, but because I didn't know who I'd be showing up as anymore. A father, or just someone trying to remember how to be one? Or worse, a guest standing by, waiting for an invitation that may never come. That's when it finally hit me. What so many parents had tried to explain for years. Your child growing up doesn't mean you lose them. It means learning to accept that you are no longer the center of their world. I'd heard that sentence so many times before, nodded along, thought I understood it, but only now was I truly living it from the outside looking in. Life kept moving forward. Work events, public appearances, the same familiar smile people expect. But there was one detail only those paying close attention would notice. Brooklyn Beckham no longer appeared in the stories I told about my present. No one officially cut anyone out, no dramatic break, no final words. But some relationships don't end like that. They slowly fall out of rhythm with everyday life. And that's the most painful kind of loss, losing someone who's still alive, still close, but no longer moving in step with you. Throughout 2024, the press kept pointing out signs I could no longer ignore. Important family events came and went without Brooklyn there. Our moments he once showed up for, even if only briefly, now passed without him entirely. And it wasn't just the media anymore. I started hearing questions from close friends, not gossip readers, people who could feel the atmosphere shift without needing headlines. They didn't ask, "What's going on with Brooklyn?" They asked something quieter, something heavier. "Is everyone doing okay these days?" And in that question, I heard everything they weren't saying out loud. Victoria Beckham handled it differently than I did. In public, she stayed composed, steady, unshaken. But behind closed doors, there were quiet moments. She would sit with her phone, rereading old messages, not to blame anyone, not to argue, just searching for clues about when everything slowly drifted off track. Like some nights, we talked about Brooklyn Beckham as if he were far away, not physically, but emotionally. And that's when a hard truth finally settled in. We had grown comfortable parenting inside a structure of authority. We built the path, our children followed it. And when that structure collapsed, we didn't know how to stand without it. By the end of 2024, that reality hit us fully. I remember one moment clearly. I was alone looking through old photos, Brooklyn as a child, sitting on my shoulders, laughing freely, no weight, no expectations, and something tightened in my chest. I realized I was missing a version of my son, not the man he is today. And that realization hurt more than anything else. That's when I understood why so many father-son relationships don't survive change. Not because there's no love, but because parents sometimes fall in love with the memory more than the present. I had to ask myself a question I'd been avoiding. Am I holding on to the Brooklyn of 2007, 2012, 2016 instead of learning how to understand the Brooklyn of 2024? And if the answer is yes, then every attempt to reconnect, no matter how sincere, might be landing at the wrong time, in the wrong way, with the wrong expectations. In the early months of 2025, I chose a different kind of silence. Not the kind used to avoid hard moments, but the kind meant to learn how to listen only when invited. I didn't post coded messages, I didn't send signals through the press, I didn't ask anyone to pass along words for me. For someone who spent a lifetime managing an image, this was the hardest part, letting go of the story completely. I finally accepted something that cut deep. I no longer had the right to narrate, and letting go of control hurt more than any criticism ever could. Because when you release control, you're forced to face a father's most basic fear. If your child never comes back, can you live with that? Some days I believe I'm ready for that answer. Other days I'm not so sure. But every day teaches me the same truth over and over again. A parent's love doesn't guarantee a permanent place at the center of their child's life. Love doesn't come with ownership. And for the first time, I understood something I had never allowed myself to believe. Maybe loving the right way isn't about fixing everything. Maybe it's about accepting that your role has changed. I am no longer the guide. I am no longer the one making decisions. Now I wait, not with demands, not with expectations, just with the hope that when my son looks back, he'll see not control, not pressure, but a door that was always open. At 50, I've learned something simple and hard at the same time. I can't lead anymore. I can only be someone ready to show up if I'm ever needed. I don't see my son's life through headlines now. I see it through what exists every day, where he lives, how he moves, how he protects the small family he's chosen to build. Brooklyn Beckham now lives mainly in the United States with his wife, Nicola Peltz, and their life isn't loud. They don't live in a house that's always open to friends or attention. It's the opposite. Their world is private. Few gatherings, rare unplanned appearances. Most days revolve around home, work, and a small, carefully chosen circle of people. And Brooklyn isn't the kid being pulled along by my schedule anymore. He sets his own pace now. His mornings don't start in gyms or at events. They start at home. He cooks, he experiments, he works with food and photography. When he posts, it's not for flash. It's functional, purpose-driven, focused. Their marriage isn't the kind the media loves to invent stories about. They're not chasing red carpets. They don't turn their relationship into buzz. When they appear together, it's usually for something intentional. Work, family, a reason that matters. And when I look at them, I see something clear. They move as a team. No one pushing ahead, no one falling behind, just balance. Nicola doesn't play the role of Beckham daughter-in-law. She's not trying to fit into a title. She stands in her own place. And Brooklyn stands beside her, not behind her. Not in front of her. And for the first time, I can say this honestly. He's not lost, he's not drifting, he's exactly where he chose to be. Brooklyn doesn't play the role people expect. He doesn't perform as the husband of a billionaire family. He and Nicola Peltz have drawn clear boundaries with both sides of their families, boundaries that might feel uncomfortable to outsiders. But those limits are exactly what keep them grounded when it comes to work and daily life. Brooklyn's path isn't straight, and it never was. He's tried different lanes. Some projects landed well, others were met with doubt. He explored photography, he published a photo book, then he shifted into culinary work. People mocked him. People said he changed directions too often. But as a father, and I see something different. I see a young man trying to build an identity that doesn't lean on the Beckham name. And that's far harder than following a road already paved for you. Brooklyn Beckham doesn't rely on my money. He doesn't live off the family brand. His life is supported mostly through his own projects and the stability that comes from his wife's family. That gives him freedom, but it also comes with pressure. Because when you don't have to fight just to survive, the world asks a sharper question. What's your real value? What do you bring beyond your last name? I know he carries that weight every day, quietly, without shouting about it. And then there's the question people always ask next. Children. Brooklyn and Nicola don't have kids yet. And from what he shared publicly, that choice is intentional. They're not rushing. They're not chasing timelines set by anyone else. They want to steady their lives first, their work, their relationship, before stepping into parenthood. And for the first time, I respect that choice without trying to influence it. Because this part of his life isn't mine to guide. It's his to protect. I respect that choice because more than anyone, I understand this truth. Becoming a parent before you're ready doesn't always break things right away. Sometimes the cracks don't show up until years later, when it's much harder to fix them. Brooklyn Beckham and Nicola Peltz live by one clear rule. Don't let outsiders decide the pace of your life. They share very little. They rarely respond to rumors. They don't engage with stories they can't control. That lifestyle is very different from the one we lived. We came from a family that had to manage the media constantly, every move analyzed, every silence questioned. And now I accept that difference for what it is. My relationship with my son's family isn't as close as it once was, but it's not hostile either. We don't see each other often, we don't speak every day. But when there is contact, it's calm, it's direct, and most importantly, it's free of pressure. I don't interfere in his marriage, I don't comment on how he lives, I don't offer advice unless I'm asked. That might sound simple, but for a father who once led every step, it's the hardest adjustment of all. And still, it's the only approach that works. Maybe for some people, this doesn't feel like a satisfying ending. There's no emotional reunion caught on camera, no public apology, no perfect family photo ready for social media. But this is real life. A grown son building his own family in his own way, and a father learning to stand on the sidelines. Not because he was pushed there, but because he understands that sometimes that's the place where the least harm is done. If there's one thing I hope people take from this final chapter, it's this. Not every father-son relationship returns to what it once was. And sometimes learning to accept that is the real act of love. Some relationships don't end, they just continue in a new form. And I've learned to accept that. Brooklyn Beckham is living his life, and for the first time in mine, I'm learning how to respect that, even when it's not easy. At 50, I no longer move at the rhythm of a footballer or a public icon. I move at the rhythm of a family that has grown up. Find a family where connection isn't measured by how often we appear in front of a camera. My life now and Victoria Beckham's is quieter than people might expect. We split our time between the United Kingdom and the United States. Most days revolve around work, our children, and the quiet moments we never used to have. Victoria still works every single day. Her fashion brand isn't an experiment anymore. It's a real business. Tight schedules, big teams, real pressure. I've watched her grow into someone very different from the Spice Girl people remember. Less glamour, more responsibility, and a much more grounded reality. We don't try to present ourselves as the perfect couple anymore. There are events I attend alone. There are shows Victoria goes to without me. Not because of distance or tension, but because we no longer feel the need to prove anything to the public. As for our children, our family has entered a new phase. We don't move in one rhythm anymore. Each of them has their own schedule, their own choices, their own space. And that's the truth people don't always want to hear. Families don't stay frozen in one version forever. They evolve, they stretch, sometimes they drift. And learning to accept that change without trying to control it is the hardest lesson I've ever had to learn. The only thing I try to protect now is one shared place to return to, even if we're not all there at the same time. A constant without pressure, a home base, not a checkpoint. I've learned not to ask for too much, not to control, not to plan every outcome. and for someone like me who once mapped out every minute of a football match. That adjustment has been brutal, but if the last few years taught me anything, it's this. Families don't run on tactics, they don't respond to strategy boards or perfect timing. They move on emotion, patience, and space. My work now isn't about performance or attention. I don't chase headlines anymore. Most of my time goes into long-term investments, ambassador roles, and football development projects. I genuinely believe in work meant to leave a real footprint, not just a moment in the news cycle. I don't hide the fact that I live a very secure life financially, but I don't live to show it either. Wealth doesn't define success for me anymore. It's a tool, a way to create stability for my family, support meaningful projects, and prepare for the years ahead. Yes, we live in homes people recognize from magazines. But what no one sees is how quiet those spaces really are. No constant parties, no endless guests, just family meals, quiet evenings, and long stretches of silence where each of us sits with our own thoughts. And that silence matters. Victoria Beckham and I don't talk much about the past anymore. Not because we've erased it, not because it didn't hurt, but because we've moved beyond needing to look back for reassurance. Some chapters don't need revisiting to prove they mattered. At this stage of life, peace isn't found in control or noise. It's found in knowing when to step back, when to stay quiet, and when to let things simply exist without trying to shape them. And that might be the most honest way I've learned to live. These days, we talk more about the present, ordinary things, health, work schedules, short trips when timing allows. No heavy speeches, no revisiting old wounds, just real life moving forward. There are mornings now with no filming, no meetings, no events pulling me in every direction. I wake up, work out, eat breakfast at home, read the news, and feel something I hadn't felt in years, a rhythm of life that I actually control. If you ask me whether I'm happy, I won't answer the old way. I won't say everything is perfect. I'll say something different. Everything is real, more real than any phase of life before this. My family is no longer a staged image. It's not a polished picture for cameras. It's a group of grown individuals, sometimes close, sometimes distant, sometimes clashing, but no longer pretending. I don't know where my relationship with Brooklyn Beckham will go. I don't know if every gap will be closed, and I've stopped making promises to myself about how it should look. But I do know one thing. I'm no longer trying to pull him back to where he used to be. I let him exist where he has chosen to stand. And as a father at this age, that might be the hardest step I've ever taken, but it's also the most honest one. If there's one thing I hope you take from this, it's this. Behind every famous family, every fortune, every version of success, there are still people learning how to live once the lights fade. I spent most of my life under the world's gaze. Now, I'm learning how to live when the world is no longer the center. And maybe this is the chapter I was never prepared for, but the one I needed the most. I've been known as an athlete, a public figure, a name people recognize. But today, I speak simply as a father, someone still learning. I'm still adjusting, still letting go. And that lesson doesn't care about fame or money. If you've made it this far, I want to ask you something real. Are you holding on to someone in your life out of love or out of expectation? Take a moment and leave your thoughts in the comments. This conversation matters more than headlines. And if this story made you reflect on your own family, don't let it end here. Stay with us by liking the video and subscribing to Old Hollywood Whispers for more stories that go deeper than the surface. If you genuinely found value in this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it. These stories are meant to travel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next.